Hello, Harmon.
Hello, Johannes. Oh, looking good.
Same to you, my friend.
Yes, do you have a new webcam?
I have a new webcam, my friend. You know
It
where it
shows.
came from. Yeah, okay. Thank you very much.
Yes.
And also, thank you very much for seeing and looking at us now, dear students. We're going to make an introduction of the Wenwang Gua traineeship. Finally, it has been so many years to do this. Huh?
Yes.
And now we finally are going to start with a whole bunch of people from all around the world. And very excited to do this with you and with all these new friends from over the world. So, a warm welcome. What we're gonna do in this video is talk about a little bit who are we, why are we doing this, and also what will be in the traineeship and what will not be in a traineeship. Uh, that is very convenient to know. And why are we doing it? And well, that's the start of it.
Yes. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Let's start a little bit about the academy, if you like. So the academy stands for ancient wisdom, ancient knowledge. It stands for to use it personally and to enhance your consciousness. That's a part of it.
Okay.
And for us is, or for me, the academy is about Taoistic approaches, and Wenwang Gua, well, stands out a little bit as an approach in the Yijing uh, to be Taoistic in nature,
Yeah,
perhaps.
that's definitely true. There's always this distinction between the Confucian way of using the I Ching and Confucian philosophy and the Taoist way. And Wenwang Gua, with all the aspects, and even if you look at the classical sources of Wenwang Gua, the language in these oldest sources is so Taoist in nature. So I think you're safe to say that Wenwang Gua is a Taoist approach to the I Ching.
Okay, thank you very much. Because I know you already also have some very interesting views on many parts, so I'm also very enthusiastic to do this with you and to learn from you. This is also a part of the academy, to learn from each other from all around the world. What do we know and to combine that. So we
Yes.
really want a community feeling. Um, let's start a little bit about us. Why
Yes.
are you interested in Bemangwa?
Yes. Well, my interest in Wenwang Gua started, I think, about 25 years ago when I gradually learned to read Chinese. And when you have access to the Chinese sources that are available in China, um, you enter into a completely new world and a much broader world of I Ching usage and I Ching philosophy than we know in the West. I
Hmm.
mean, if we stick to the Western translations, like the translations from Wilhelm, Alfred Huang, etc., then you're mainly introduced to working with the text of the I Ching, and which is still a more or less Confucian approach.
Yeah.
Even Alfred Huang, who is described on the cover of his translation as a Taoist, still considered himself, when it came to the I Ching, more a Confucianist. So you always more or less pushed towards a Confucian view of the I Ching. Whereas in China, for more than 2,000 years, there is another approach of working with the I Ching, which is still fairly new here in the West. But this whole Taoist approach of working with the hexagram and not being dependent on the text, that's an approach that existed for more than 2,000 years, and that is still something that we hardly know anything about here in the West, which I still find mind blowing. They know it in China for more than 2,000 years. We hardly know anything about it. It's still weird. But anyway, yeah. But Wen Wang Gua is part of that tradition. And when I learned Chinese, to read Chinese, I read all these books about a very weird, strange system that uses the five elements, the stems and branches, and added all these other labels to hexagrams. Yeah, and you know, it's not that this information has never reached the West. I mean, Richard Wilhelm describes it in his notes. And at the end of his translation, you have this enigmatic page
Yeah,
with
yeah, yeah.
the eight houses with no explanation whatsoever. But when you go to his personal notes that he kept when he was working on his translation, you can see that he actually studied Wenwang Gua.
Yeah,
So
really.
yeah, he did. He did. He made detailed notes about parts of Wenwang Gua. So I still have pictures of these photos of these notes.
Oh, perfect.
So, but he never shared that with us. But it was there. It was more or less available. And also in George Fender's dissertation, that's actually one of my first entries to Wenwang Gua. George Fender's the dissertation about Fai that is in that dissertation, which is just a normal English dissertation, information about the eight houses and Wenwang Gua is already found. So it was there, but nobody knows about it. So and that's the funny thing about this whole Wenwang Gua system, this whole Taoist way of working with the I Ching. People, it is there, but it's hardly available to most users. And when I read about Wenwang Gua, still about 20 years ago, I thought, well, this is interesting, this is fascinating, this is so different way of using the I Ching. And I thought I wanted to know more about it. And still 20 years ago, I actually gave a course about Wenwang Gua.
Okay.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
But my knowledge about Wenwang Gua was so extremely limited that when I look back at that course that I gave at the time, I think, oh my God, how did I ever have the courage to give that course? Because it was such a new world to me, and I didn't at that point I didn't understand all the specific keywords and vocabulary of Wenwang Gua.
Hmm.
And so certain things I must definitely have translated wrong from these Chinese sources. So sorry, students, but now I'm doing better. And during these 20 years, I've still studied on and off the Wenwang Gua system, and I try to go back to the most original sources. There are Western books about Wenwang Gua, and these books are fine. They teach you Wenwang Gua, the basics of Wenwang Gua, with all the rules that are connected to that system, and that's okay. However, when you go back to all these sources, the most original sources of Wenwang Gua, then a whole new world opens up, and there is so much material about Wenwang Gua
It's crazy, huh?
in Chinese that we don't know about in the West, and that is. And I thought everybody else needs to know about this. I thought so, and that is one of my reasons to give this training, to share the most original, and it often to me that often means the oldest view of Wenwang Gua. Um, a lot of information that we have about Wenwang Gua and a lot of books and trainings that we have here now, the books like from Jack Cho and Alfred Key and some others, they teach you the basics of Wenwang Gua, and these basics are often um, built on the work of this famous guy, translates his name as Wild Crane.
Yep.
And the nice thing about the book from Wild Crane is that he has so many examples of Wenwang Gua usage, but the bad thing about his book is that he removed a lot of original stuff from the Wenwang Gua material. That's even explicitly mentioned in the introduction of his book. that the introduction is written by some Chinese guy. I can't remember his name, and he says, "Well, we have removed the Gua Shen, and we have removed this, and we have removed that because that's way too complicated. So we have simplified Wenwang Gua." So what most books actually teach here in the West, and most teachers maybe as well, is a more or less simplified version of Wenwang Gua. If you step to the period before Wild Crane, then all the material about Wenwang Gua is way more complex, but also very rich in nature and rich in language, where Wild Crane's work is mainly about fixed rules. All the other books before his time, which he actually simplified, are show a view of Wenwang Gua that is so much about images and so much about not only applying rules but also feeling what is actually happening.
Yeah.
And making every element of Wenwang Gua concrete, and that is what I like about that old stuff. So that I consider that my job to transmit these old sources to the students of the training and to show them, well, when we're talking about the six relationships, for instance, this is what the Huo Lin says about the six relationships, which is one of the oldest sources. And do with it as you see fit. I'm going to explain to you. I'm going to translate it for you. But what I find most important that you see how it works with images, which is not so much different from other Yijing usage. It's all about image, and that's the same for Wenwang Gua. So
Perhaps even more.
yeah, maybe even more. So I'm going to go back to all these sources. I'm going to share these sources to give the student an idea of how Wenwang Gua was and how flexible the whole Wenwang Gua system actually is, according to these ancient sources. And does this actually answer your question, I wonder?
Well, I must say you're activating Trigram Lake.
Yeah.
And as we know, in a personal level, you're connected with that trigram. So I'm smiling about, okay, this is Lake in action. I love this.
Yes, because there is so much. Like, for instance, this is something, Johannes. This is something that we discussed numerous times.
Yeah.
The five elements, they play an important role in Wenwang Gua.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole system is based on the five elements, but mainly, if you look at all these oldest sources, and all the Western books, they talk about five elements, but they don't give the five elements meaning.
No.
They mainly work with the interactions between the five elements, which is fine. But if you go back to these oldest sources, and you have to dig really well to find it, because for a long time I thought, oh, they don't do anything with five elements in Wenwang Gua. They don't use the qualities of the five elements, and that in a way that is true. There are not introduction chapters about five elements in all these oldest sources. But if you look at the themed chapters in all these old books, then you see that they constantly refer to the five elements and give that meaning. And that is something that I have never ever seen in any of the modern Wenwang Gua books, that you actively use the five elements beyond their relationships and using the qualities of each separate element. I don't see that in the modern Wenwang Gua literature, and yet if you go back to the oldest sources, they do that.
Yeah.
And that is something that maybe that's a mission. I want to introduce that back into Wenwang Gua, the usage of the five elements, the qualities of the five elements beyond their normal relationships. I mean, focusing on these relationships is essential, but focusing on the qualities of each element, of each wuxing, is also essential as far as I'm concerned. So if you have a moving wood line, then that wood line that does something with another line, fine. But what is the quality of wood in your specific situation related to the topic? And that is something that I don't find in the modern Wenwang Gua literature, and that it is used in the oldest literature. So I want to introduce that again in Wenwang Gua. So that's one of the things that I would like to do. And there's so many more things that wild crane removed from the usage of Wenwang Gua that I just would like to share with the students, because it makes working all these things that he left out, if you introduce that back, if you use that, it makes Wenwang Gua so much more fun.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, Wenwang Gua is just fun. It's such a fun system. Whereas most
absolutely.
people think, oh, Wenwang Gua is way too complicated. All these rules and all these systems, all these labels. The hexagram becomes a Christmas tree, and every line you have a set of balls and ribbons, and it is way too much. People think, yeah, that's true. It is a lot of information, but knowing all these labels and knowing when you can apply them and make your choices in that makes working with Wenwang Gua so much more rewarding. And also, well, it's just a fun system.
It's very much fun. If
Yeah.
you, the rules are good to know,